Good afternoon, North Penn, and welcome to North Penn Today. I'm Mike Bodai, one of the learning coaches, and we are broadcasting to you live from the North Penn TV studio. Today I'm joined by Dr. John Hodge and Ron Martiello, and Dr. Harvey Perkins and Meg Burke. During our time together this afternoon, we ask that you please join the Zeetings presentation that is currently in progress to follow along and participate during our live broadcast. Before we get started, we would like to remind you to please join in the conversation this afternoon by utilizing Twitter. You can tweet us at Mike Bodai, at Meg Burke, NPSD, and at Ron Martiello using the hashtag NPSD PD throughout our broadcast. Please join us, or please tweet us your thoughts and any ideas that we may spark so that you and your North Penn colleagues can share with teachers from across the globe and learn and be inspired by our discussion this afternoon. Prizes will be awarded for the top 3 tweets from this afternoon. Before I kick things off to Ron and John, let's take a look at our learning goals for our time together this afternoon. First, highlight and celebrate what teachers are doing for kids every day and explain why teachers matter. Define CFU, checking for understanding, and the effect it has on all student learning. And finally, explain how we can use specific CFU strategies to engage and empower all of our students. John and Ron?
Hi, John. How are you today?
Doing great.
Fantastic. Now, you and your team have spent a lot of time here in our elementary buildings,
Sure.
and I am sure you saw a lot of really great things.
Yep.
Can you give us some of your top highlights in terms of areas that are glowing and some areas in which you could see some growing?
Yeah. Well, we were very impressed with all of the campuses we visited. There's a caring environment in every single school. We think that the schools are conducive to high academic achievement for all children. When we think about levels of rigor, instructional objectives, some of the basics that we would like to see in schools, you guys have that covered. We were very, very impressed. We also like the learning environment for the most part. Kids seem to be loved and cared for in every single classroom. One of the areas, though, we think we could focus on for growth is checking for understanding. When we think in terms of the trauma-informed classroom, checking for understanding is one of those strategies that will have a huge benefit on the kids that we typically miss in our instruction on a daily basis.
Awesome, awesome. Thanks for sharing those glows and grows. And today we have to be reminded of our why. And it is easy to get distracted and overwhelmed, especially at this time of the year. We're heading into the home stretch. We do have our testing windows that we are paying attention to, but sometimes we forget the reason why we're here in the first place. So, John, can you tell us why you decided to become a teacher?
Oh my gosh. I became a teacher because I realized the impact that a teacher had on my life. And if you look at all of the educational research, the biggest variable that has the most impact on student achievement is the teacher. So by being a teacher, we are changing lives.
Awesome. Did you hear that, teachers? So let's throw it to our friends in the audience and ask them to respond to this question. As we're waiting for their responses to come in, let's check in with Meg and Harvey for those results.
Thank you so much, Ron and John. And today really is the focus on teachers and students and the impact we both have on each other. And I love the question, what really influenced us to become the teachers that we are today? And so, Harvey, how would you answer that question?
Well, it's kind of crazy because I'm going to have to sound like my partner across the way there, but it's the same thing. My family, I came from a family that was not a college-educated family. Neither one of my parents went to college. My sister didn't go to college. So we were kind of middle-class folk, just ambling along until I had this one teacher in my life. And this teacher made such a difference because it opened up new horizons, things that took me out of my little comfort zone and began to say, you can be whatever you want to be. So it was more not the instructional strategies they used, but the belief system in me as a person. And I think that social emotional learning is so huge today because there are a lot of kids out there that our teachers will come into contact with, and they just need somebody in their life that says you can be more, you can be what you want to be.
And that relationship building is so important. And you'll see this coming in from our friends in our elementary schools, collaborations between teachers, our love for kids. We do what we do every day because we're here for kids. We show up for kids every day. Examples of other teachers, of course, building our PLN, both in our own buildings and on Twitter. We know we have friends out there following along, elementary school teachers and experiences, and here we go again, social emotional learning, those connections we make with kids in our classroom. And this idea and concept of checking for understanding is really important because those are the reminders and checkpoints to make sure that kids actually understand the content that we're delivering.
Oh, you're right, because it's the connection between learning and life that we can leave out. If we get too technical and it's just all about the technical, then we miss the fact that a lot of kids need to say the why.
Yep.
What is the why? And a teacher can really help them with that, but the belief system has to precede everything.
And you see that in all these responses from people out in our audience, which really is just so heartwarming to see their passion for what they do.
Right.
So this is one of my favorite quotes, and I go to it quite often, that we change culture with every interaction we have because every single one of them matters, because we don't know which one of those our students are going to talk about when we're not there. Yeah. What are they leaving our classrooms with? They're not leaving saying, this was the greatest worksheet ever, but they're remembering those moments and experiences that we give them.
No, if you think back on your own career, we remember moments, but the moments are usually the relationship moments. We remember a great teacher. It's not because, oh, they had a great lesson plan this day. You know, I can't remember any lesson plan really specifically, but I can remember moments where the teacher made an impact on my life, and that's huge.
Absolutely, and that's what today's about. So let's talk about some other factors that influence student achievement. There's a lot of research out there about the impact and efficacy we have on kids in our classrooms and how it's measured by data. And there was a quote that we really saw on Twitter that really had a lot of conversation around it, that success lies in the critical nature of collaboration and the strength of believing that together, administrators, faculty, and students can accomplish great things together. And I look at this and I think to myself, this word collective efficacy. And what does that really mean to you?
Yeah, it's really huge, because the idea that a lot of the kids we have, and particularly elementary, I'm glad we're talking to the elementary audience, because we have kids come in, many of them are a blank slate, we think, but they're not totally a blank slate. They're coming in and a lot of adults have said things to them that we don't even know about, coming in from the community, coming in from their families, and a lot of times they don't hear those encouraging comments. They don't hear those things, you can be whatever you want to be. Now, a lot of us think, well, that's normal, shouldn't they have heard that at home? Well, sometimes in the hurried pace we have, and a lot of our families now are hurried, the conversations that you might think happening around the dinner table, they're just not happening now. And so when kids come in, you might be the first person that said to this kid, I see something in you. I see something exciting in you. You can be wonderful. You can be anything. And it's that collective efficacy. We have to begin to share those things with kids, because that could open up their mind to what we want to teach them academically.
Absolutely. So we're going to ask our friends out there to really think about which of the following factors that they think has the greatest impact on student achievement. So for our friends out in the audience, we're going to ask you to pick from one of these options, and you're going to start to see the results coming in. Is it collective teacher efficacy, homework, we hear a lot about homework out there, motivation, parental involvement, prior achievement, and then we have the socioeconomic status. And as we're watching these live results come in, Harvey, you can see we are between that collective teacher efficacy and that motivation.
Right, you're exactly right, because the kids want to know, do we believe in them? John and I, when we travel around the country, we talk a lot to kids, because we find out what is the kernel of belief that they have. And what they'll tell you is, if I believe the teacher believes in me, I will go through the wall. I'll run through a wall for them. But if for some reason they feel like that the teacher's just doing a task and it's not about them as individuals, then they tend not to make the effort. So the whole idea is, you look at the efficacy piece and the motivation piece are linked, and it even overcomes, and that's what the research says. If those two things are done well, it overcomes the effect of the lower socioeconomic status.
And after those results, it's clear that our teachers are aware of that. And we look at this breakdown, the effect size, and it matches up perfectly with what our audience had shared with us. It's really that effect size of the collective teacher efficacy.
Right.
So it's clear that teachers have a profound impact on student achievement, but what else can we do to have an impact on student learning every single day?
Well, and this is the thing. It's a part of it. When we talk checking for understanding is a part of a teacher's DNA, and particularly at the elementary. My favorite thing is to go into a kindergarten class or a first grade classroom. The kids are coming in, and they're so excited about learning. They don't know all the technical pieces and all the language to use. But what's really great in the elementary classrooms, all the way K-5, what you find is the teachers are used to doing things like teaching the skills and checking, doing progress checks, progress monitoring. A lot of times they'll have skills worksheets in math and ELA, and that's really great. In order to do that, they have to know, well, which of my kids know the skill that I taught today? And they're very good at it. So I think for elementary teachers, this idea of checking for understanding is almost a part of their DNA. They would say, well, how could you teach a lesson without checking for understanding? Now, the older when kids get, the thing we have to work on is we start teaching concepts and moving away from some of the skills, and then we forget that we also have to check there, because we talked about the trauma-informed classroom. If you have a kid that comes in and they had a really bad experience with an adult that day before they got there, you've got to know, is that child with me?
Yep. And again, it's teaching kids, not just content.
Right.
And we're going to throw this back to our friends over at the desk, Ron and John, to talk to us a little bit more about checking for understanding and its relevance to the North Penn School District. Ron?
All right, John, so we have a lot of acronyms in education. We have TDA, we have CBA, we have CDT, we have my favorite, MESS, MESS, that's our math strategy. John, can you explain what CFU is and why it's relevant for us here at NPSD?
Well, it's many reasons. Checking for understanding helps a child to gauge where they are relative to a classroom lesson. So in order for a student to progress, it's really important that they understand what they know and what they don't know. For the teacher, I think the benefit is pretty obvious. If we're moving forward with content and students don't have the basic foundational understanding of content, then we're going to miss them later on. And this is particularly important for kids who come to us who are behind. For administrators, it helps us to help teachers. It helps us to support their growth as professionals. It also gives us an extra insight in terms of our data. It helps us to understand why kids are where they are. So I think there's just huge benefits when it comes to checking for understanding.
Awesome. So checking for understanding is a process used by teachers during instruction that provides feedback to adjust ongoing teaching and learning to improve student achievement intended to meet those instructional outcomes. And that is a quote by Carol Ann Tomlinson. And as we take a look at this quote, we are going to ask you out there to take to Twitter. And we want you to tweet out 3 words that stand out to you in this quote. And if you could do that right now, that'd be fantastic. John, I'm going to ask you, what 3 words stand out to you in this quote?
Well, really everything stands out. I'm drawn to the word adjust because checking for understanding helps you to adjust your lesson plans or your lessons. I also pay attention to ongoing. It's not something that's an event. It's something that should be a part of your everyday instruction. And I'm drawn to teaching and learning. Which is more than the 3 words, but that as a phrase is something that's really important to me.
Because sometimes we can get stuck on the teaching part, and we get lost for the learning part. So
exactly. The point of teaching is for students to learn. Yeah, sure.
So right now we're going to take it over to Mr. Bada. He's going to check in with Twitter right now to see if anyone out there is tweeting out to us. Mike?
Thanks, Ron. So taking a look at some tweets that are coming in, I see some of our friends over at North Wales are actually enjoying some flexible seating here, which is great. So awesome to see. I don't see anything related to the prompt we just gave you, probably because there's a little bit of a delay. But we encourage you to keep tweeting throughout our presentation today and take a look at what your colleagues are saying using the hashtag NPSDPD. And I'm going to throw it back to Ron.
So, John, you did mention a little bit about the value CFU has to students, teachers, and administrators. Could you explain that a little further as far as, how deep should we go with each one of those stakeholders?
Well, I think let's focus on the teacher. It is so important for me to know where our kids are relative to a specific skill, a specific standard. If we're rushing through content, if we are just trying to cover the content and not gauging where our kids are relative to the lesson itself, we're going to miss a lot of kids. Now, earlier today, I was at a school and we talked about the fact that some students come to us wired to learn. They are there for a purpose, they're very focused, they are ready. But if you disaggregate your data, you realize that there are lots of kids who we are missing. And for that population in every single school, checking for understanding is going to have a huge benefit. It's going to allow us to target our support in areas where kids need it most. So for me, I want to focus on that teacher. That teacher's use of checking for understanding is huge.
Awesome. Awesome. So let's ask our audience which of these three are the hardest to answer. I think there are 3 questions that we have here. We're going to do this by a Zeedings poll. And can you check the one that's hardest to answer? What do I want my students to know and be able to do? How will I know they've learned it? How will I empower and enrich students who are already there and know it, or who are struggling to know it? So Meg, you want to take a look at these results?
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Ron and John. And it's really interesting when you look at this, which ones do we as teachers find the actual hardest to answer? And I look at this and honestly, Harvey, it depends on the given day and the instructional outcome that I have in place, which makes these all kind of hard to answer. But I think sometimes I struggle the most with kids who already know the content. How do we empower and enrich them?
Right, and I think one of the things we've got to be aware of now in the standards-based environment we live in. Back when I was in school, this wasn't an issue because teachers pretty much chose their own content and decided what they thought was important to teach. But now we live in a standards-based world. We live in a world where the content, and in fact, even some of the assessments are defined for us. So when you get, how do I know today what my students should learn? That has to be standards-driven, but it has to be very specific on the piece of that standard I am going to teach today. And for a lot of our teachers, breaking down that big standard into a daily objective is a tough task. But the thing that always drives it for me down here is, what am I going to do if I have kids that come in and I do a little quick pretest and they already know it, like you said? How do I enrich those kids while I deal with the students that are already there? Now, the great thing about, I said earlier about the elementary teachers having a DNA for this. They automatically think of groups. I don't know hardly any elementary teacher that doesn't think about how can I use groups effectively in my classroom. Now, I was a secondary teacher and I can tell you that we don't hear that grouping discussion a lot the higher we go up. But in elementary, they've got kind of a mental frame that says, okay, today I've got to work with this group who did not get the skill yesterday, and I'm going to enrich the others. That's the big issue. And
I love that even our audience and our friends out there said that they also struggle with what do you do with kids who already know it and how do you empower them? And you know, with our tech focus, our personalized learning journey, our differentiation and our structures that we have in place, this is really an exciting spot to think about. Right. And I notice we have additional questions we can ask. How frequently should I check for understanding? What CFU strategies actually work the best? And what do I do with all of the information that I actually collect? And as John had pointed out earlier, it's this process-driven approach to teaching and the impact it has on the learner. Over to you, Ron and John.
So CFU is an assessment tool. It's a formative assessment tool, and you said it has the largest effect size on student learning and achievement.
Yes.
So, you know, taking time to find this as a priority, John, you know, how important is it as far as the impact to empower students to learn further?
Well, it's important for students to know where they are in terms of a lesson line. So we want students to ultimately become independent learners. Mm-hmm. And so the process of checking for understanding and giving feedback to the student allows the student to understand where they are, and if we really do it right, then they're going to understand what they need to do to move forward. So if there's a specific skill, a specific piece of content that they are missing, they can address it themselves. It also can gauge whether or not they ask a teacher a question or ask a learning partner a question. All of those things are a part of the checking for understanding body of work. It impacts the student positively and the teacher.
It sounds like, you know, we're sending our kids into a future that's going to change even more rapidly than it may be changing today. So that learning agility, being able to make sure they're checking their own understanding,
absolutely, and
being able to have teachers model that, it sounds like it's so very important.
Right. We are teaching kids today who will be exposed to virtual classrooms. If they're not this year, at some year in the future, they will be exposed to this. And in those classrooms, you have to check for understanding independently often. So this is an important skill for students and for teachers.
Awesome. So now in just a moment, we're going to give our audience members some low-tech and high-tech CFU strategies that they can start trying and applying in their classrooms. But before we do that, let's CFU right now to see what our audience has learned. So we're going to throw it to Mike. He has a quizzes for you.
Okay, North Penn, so if you could enter your name to play the game. We do have some prizes to give out to our top, our winners. This game includes questions from today, as well as some top tech tools that we've promoted this throughout the school year, and some things that are coming up, including our Infinite Campus training that's taking place on May 21st. So if you could quickly enter in your name for us as I get out of this slideshow for a second. And we should see names coming up already. Here we go. We're almost, we'll give you another minute or so to continue joining. And wow, look at all those names popping up there. Again, throughout this game, we're just testing your knowledge on some CFU strategies and some topics that we've covered today, as well as some things that are coming up with North Penn in regards to technology. And I'll give it another 15 seconds or so. If you are not in Zeetings, you can go to join.quizzes.com and enter the code 486711. And we'll go ahead and start.
Now by Dr. Jenna Rufo, and we're looking at all of these results come in from our audience members. I'm really competitive, so I get really excited when I see this game board. Dr. Rufo?
Great. I see North Wales. I was there this morning in second place. I did see someone write Dr. Jenna Rufo on there. I'm not quite sure how that happened. Perhaps my colleague Dr. Bauer in the studio. We have Sam in first place. Brianna kind of pulling up. Number 3, Amanda W. Wendy Kornstein from North Wales is in the mix. Hannah, could that be Hannah Gendron from York Avenue?
I see her climbing.
I see Beth Reeling at Montgomery. Oh, look, I'm doing pretty good now. Number 3.
Your virtual person is on there.
John B. John Brem in the mix over at Nash.
And again, we have prize patrol for the top 3 winners of this Quizzes Challenge. It looks like it's still going on. What a fun way to check in with people and what they know, even for kids.
Absolutely. So Meg, while these results are coming in, let's talk a little more about checking for understanding. So I've been out in a lot of classrooms lately, and one of the practices that I see going on a lot is station rotation or centers. So one thing that I think is really important, that as we're teaching and we're working through these strategies with station teaching, guided reading, whatever the centers are, when your kids are in their independent stations, how do you know that they are on track and that they're achieving? So you might be working with another group. So how do we know that students in their independent stations are really making the progress that we want them to make?
That is such a great question, and I have learned so much. You know, my background is in secondary, and so when I'm in elementary school classrooms and I watch how they differentiate instruction and how they're constantly checking in with kids, I've seen teachers do the most creative things, from low tech to high tech. Sometimes I see kids write on the little whiteboards and hold them up what they know or what they're struggling with. I've seen kids flip cups if they have a question. I've actually seen kids actually become teacher leaders and circulate and help each other. Again, I love using tech to check in with kids, either in a Google form, something as simple as quizzes we've seen out there. Of course, Pear Deck is another way we can let kids kind of move through things on their own, and then monitor and adjust. I think the most important thing, though, is that teachers are a guide by the side and not a sage on the stage with instruction, and that we're constantly monitoring and adjusting throughout the classroom and not just standing in one spot.
Great. I couldn't agree more. So Meg, let's check back on our results. It looks like
Who are the winners?
we have the North Whalers 2G. Could that be second grade?
Here they go.
Oh, Sarah Noon, 5th place.
Yay, Sarah. We have Amanda Vivi in 4th, Steve in 2nd, and the North Whalers in 1st place.
And don't forget, I was 3rd on that.
Oh, yeah. Thanks to Dr. Bauer posing as Dr. Rufo, which is awesome. So here's our scoreboard. Again, this is such a great way to interact with kids and have fun with them. You can even compete across classrooms, and look at all these results coming in, showing us what our own teachers know when it comes to tech and learning and teaching. Back to you, Ron.
Done. That was amazing.
Yeah,
Lots of excitement with
I'm
those
tweeting.
answers. Yes, awesome.
All right.
So, you know, it's obvious that our learners, our teacher learners out there are ready to go. We have our learners ready to go.
Sure.
But can we have a serious conversation about the difference between compliance and engagement?
Wow. Well, to me, compliance is just following the rules. Engagement means you are actually getting something out of the lesson, and that is so important. We want learning to be fun. Learning can be rigorous and fun, and so when you are simply complying with what a teacher is asking, to me, you're not really learning. You're just following a direction. But when you are engaged in the lesson, you are participating. You're also being metacognitive about it. You are thinking about your own thinking. You're responding to the teacher. You're responding to your learning partners. That is true engagement, and it makes learning so enriching for students.
So, let me see. We're going to take a look at, we're going to poll. We have also some strategies here that work best. Can you talk to us a little bit about these strategies here?
Well, they're pretty self-explanatory. Oral strategies are times when teachers are looking for an oral confirmation of what a student knows or does not know. Visual cues are things like thumbs up, thumbs down, where a teacher is gauging where her classroom or his classroom is. Writing strategies, those are the ones that the low-tech strategies that I tend to like best, because you have a true visual representation of what a student knows or what a student can do. And of course, the technology tools are so much fun. We just experienced that. I'm sitting here talking to you, tweeting. I'm actually losing my place because I'm tweeting and talking, but it's a lot of fun. So all of these are tools that need to be deployed when a teacher needs them, and it's up to the teacher to gauge when and where they're used.
Awesome. So, and we also, giving teachers that autonomy is important, because sometimes, especially in our primary grade levels, it's a little difficult. We'll talk a little bit more about that later as we talk about some of those low-tech strategies. But we do have another poll here. Let's poll our audience to have them vote on CFU strategies that they believe work best. So here's our Zeetings poll. Meg?
Thank you so much. And once again, Jenna, I look at this and I think of who I am as a learner, and I'm pretty visual, but I also love to write. And it's interesting because our audience members started saying visual cues were super important, and then all of a sudden the tech tool kind of just took off. What can you make from these results?
I think there's a place for everything. So, you know, if there's not one strategy that's necessarily superior to another. You want to mix it up, vary it depending on the lesson. And with tech, we want to make sure that we're using tech meaningfully, so that we're really using it to elevate our lesson and just not just replace something else. So I think there's a place for everything, and it's really dependent upon where you're at with the lesson.
And it's interesting, when we pulled secondary, we saw more coming through with the writing strategies and the tech tools, and we think for some of our youngest learners, those oral skills are so important, those foundational skills.
Absolutely.
Yep. So thank you so much, everybody, for jumping in and kind of sharing with us what you found to be the most beneficial in your classrooms and the most effective.
So let's talk a little more in depth, John, about those low-tech strategies here. Can you tell us a little bit about what they are?
Well, I'll tell you about my favorites, because there are so many that you could possibly use. One of the more common low-tech strategies that people or teachers use is thumbs up and thumbs down. So you might pose a question to your classroom and you want to gauge if a student understands a basic concept, and you will say, thumbs up, do you understand? Thumbs up. Well, that's a beautiful strategy, but you have to be careful, because some kids are going to give you the thumbs up, but they really don't know what the concept is. So there's got to be some sort of follow-up to make sure.
Which is what you were talking about with compliance. Sometimes they put that thumbs up because they think that's being compliant.
Exactly. So there needs to be some follow-up to be very sure that a student has grasped the concept that you are covering. For me, retelling a story or retelling a concept to the teacher or to a learning partner is very effective. If a student can actually teach the concept to someone else, that's a great way, or low-tech way, of gauging whether or not a student has actually internalized the concept that you are covering. So there are just so many that we can't mention them all, but the low-tech strategies are effective, but sometimes you need to do some follow-up to make sure that students actually have or do understand what you're covering.
How about those writing strategies, John?
I love them. For me, I like the writing strategy because there is an artifact that you can actually review. I am a old-fashioned teacher. I'm a big exit card person, because the exit card tells me exactly what a student knows and is able to do, and it's something that I can use as data, and I can also follow up on the exit card on the next day. So writing strategies are effective because they give you a visual representation of where the student is. But if you look at technology, it does the same thing. So both of those are very effective ways of checking for understanding.
And if we have students who are in like the kindergarten level and they may not have some of these writing literacy skills, and it may be difficult for them to even articulate a sentence on paper, we can always fall back to those oral strategies, correct?
Exactly. And I am always shocked at how technologically adept little kids are. I mean, even the really, really young students are very accomplished when it comes to using technology. So don't shy away from it, because some of the little ones are really, really super tech savvy. So,
awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. So let's go back to Meg to tell us a little bit more about those additional NPSD low-tech checking for understanding strategies.
Thank you so much, Ron and John. And we're going to share with you some really low-tech strategies that have been teacher approved and used in classrooms. And I love that Ron always points out adjusting things. These are ideas, but how it actually looks in your classroom is up to you as the expert in the room. You know your kids, you know their energy, you know what they're good at, where they struggle. So any of these can really be adapted in any way. One of my favorites is called the elevator pitch. And it's telling me in 2 minutes one thing you learned and one thing you want to know more about. And you give kids this 2-minute kind of drill, which is the average time it takes to get on an elevator and go up, a few floors. And so this can be done to a friend. They can do it by drawing. They can do it by sketching. For our older learners, they can do it by writing. But I love that it's just that 2 minutes, tell me what you know.
That's right. And the great thing about it is that you could take this down as far as you want, because the ones who love to talk, I mean, kindergarten is first, second grade, they love to talk. And if you keep the questions targeted so they're talking about the task at hand, you can find a lot about whether they actually internalize it or not.
Excellent. And so our first one is, of course, elevators. Our second is called the if statement. And it's asking a child, if I had to teach a friend how to do this concept, I would be really good at teaching blank. And I love that, because it really is shifting that control from being someone who's delivering information to kids to letting them own it. And again, this can be done orally. It can be done in a think, pair, share. And I love it because it allows the child to become the teacher.
That's right. Students owning their own learning is the biggest thing.
Absolutely. A third one we call peers, and students can actually write their own questions about the content and then turn and quiz a friend. And I've seen this done in classrooms, especially in elementary, where they actually give kids thinking sentence stems, question stems to use, and they talk it out first, and then they're eventually moved into the writing, and they do this think, pair, share. They talk about them together and quiz each other, which is really great to see.
And one of the things we have found this one so good for, particularly in the upper elementary, 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, we actually teach our students the levels of thinking. And it doesn't matter whether you use DOK, or levels 1, 2, 3, and 4. But once you teach your students the levels of thinking, you can have them say, I want to write 2 level 2 questions, 2 level 3 questions, 2 level 4 questions, and then I want you to ask. So you combine the concept knowledge with the rigor. So you can do both using this strategy.
I've even seen kids challenge their parents and guardians at home with the very questions that they came up with in class.
Right.
Thank you so much. I'm going to throw this back to Ron to go over a few more of our low-tech strategies.
So here's one that I like, where it's like take 1, or you could have the kids take 2 or take 3. Depending on your age level, they may not be able to do all 3 ideas, but maybe they could just take 1 idea that students can reflect and share that is the most interesting idea that they discovered during the lesson. So kindergarten, you might want to say take 1, but in 5th grade, you might want to have them say take 3. Or in 5th grade, you might want to have them say take 3. Students can share and talk and stretch and write those ideas down depending on what their capacity is for their literacy skills. John?
Well, sketchnoting is something that's really popular. I'm married to an art teacher, so I might be a bit biased, but it is a way of allowing students to make a visual representation of what they learned rather than talking students through it. So that's another possible strategy. That
I love sketchnoting. This is one of my, because I love to draw, and I am very visual. I like to kind of, sometimes that drawing could be center out, or sometimes it could be top down, which will also show you how the students are thinking. The next strategy is 3, 2, 1. Have students talk about 3 things they learned, 2 things they still want to learn, and 1 question they still have. So it's always good to ask our kiddos, what they're wondering, especially that last one. We hit kids with questions all the time, but do we take time to ask them just that 1 question they may have about the content?
Exactly, and I like this strategy because it's forcing a student to become an independent learner, which ultimately that's what we want for them. Yes.
Awesome. So now we are going to go to another Zeetings poll. We want you to participate. We want your feedback. Meg, we're going to go to that Zeetings poll. You're going to check the results in just a couple minutes.
Wow.
All right.
Wow, look at these results. Harvey and I had a chance to kind of look at them coming in, and I know we gave you just about 6, and Harvey made a really great observation about these results. Harvey, would you like to share it with our audience?
Yeah, what's really great, and actually you helped us here because you actually said each of us have different ones that we like. And the idea is there's not one of these that's really powerful and the others aren't. So we're glad to see that in most cases they came in different people liking different ones because they're all useful and they're all valuable. One thing we want you to to remember, the key before checking for understanding is not to find out which student, one student, first hand up, knows, but I want to find out of my 25 students, how many know. And each one of these strategies that you picked lets you know how many of the students in your class got the concept. So we were really pleased to see that they're distributed pretty much equally. There's only one that's a little bit off, but the others are all liked by many of you, and that's exciting.
And we really encourage you that if you try any of these in your classrooms, especially when the kids come back from their break, to tweet it out, to share it with your colleagues, to talk about how that enhanced a student's understanding of content. I'm going to turn it over to Mike, who's going to go over 3 more strategies that are low tech. Mike?
So the next one I have for you is the 411. And in this example, imagine you just received a text from a friend who missed class. You can have students create a fake text giving their friend the 411 on the most important information or concepts from class. I don't know about you, but I love staying in touch with my fellow coaches through text messages to find out what I've missed when I may not have been in a particular meeting. So students, I'm sure, would love it just as much. The next one I have is what do you emoji? And we came up with this one the other day. Since students may have difficult time maybe drawing, you could maybe provide them with some emojis that they can maybe circle or add to, or they could draw their own to represent how they feel about a concept or skill they learned about during the lesson. Again, this is something that you could either give them ahead of time or you could have them draw their own. And the 9th one is glow and grow. Allow your students to have an opportunity to reflect on one of the glowing moments from the class in their learning to one area in which they need some growing. So this is another great tool that you can give to allow students an opportunity to reflect on what they know and where they may need to go back and review on their own. And finally, the 10th and final one is roll call. I love this one because it involves rolling a dice, and what student doesn't like to do that? But I would advise you teachers, if you have some dice, you may want to go get some eraser dice so you don't have to listen to that noise. But at the end of the class, have each student roll a dice, and based on their answer, or based on the number that they get, they briefly answer to one of the following questions. So if they roll a 1, they would answer, I want to remember. If they roll a 2, something I learned today. If they rolled a 3, one word to sum up what I learned, and so on. For more ideas, please visit the following bit.ly/CFU ideas. And now back to Jenna and Meg.
Thank you so much, Mike. We appreciate it. And Jenna, there's such great ideas. I mean, we are constantly sharing all of these new ideas. I know you've been in so many classrooms where you've seen many of these things, but out of all of these, which one is your favorite?
I like the elevator pitch. I like the idea of a quick 2-minute, what have you learned? What have you done? But sometimes, we don't always necessarily have 2 minutes for everyone to go around. So a variation on that we've used sometimes is share a sentence, not a paragraph. So tell us succinctly what is one thing that you learned, quickly go around. I know I like to use that in PD a lot, or sometimes when I'm in my meetings with Dr. Bauer, he might be going on a little too long, so share a sentence, not a paragraph is often an effective strategy for that as well.
And I love this emoji, and Mike, Ron, and I were talking yesterday. What do you emoji is number 8, is definitely one of our favorites. We've actually seen it in classrooms where kids even draw their own, so that's really fun too. But I'm excited to see what our audience has to pick as some of their favorites. So we're going to pull up that poll, and we're really going to ask you, which of these low-tech strategies would you most likely use in your classroom? The 411, the what do you emoji, a glow and a grow, and roll call. Glow and grow is really trending out there right now when we talk about giving kids feedback over a grade or a score.
Right, and I think also a great thing about glow and grow is it doesn't always have to be the teacher that's giving that feedback. It can be kids giving the feedback to each other.
Which I think is so great. And we always talk about living in the feedback, not the score with kids. And so much of checking for understanding is giving kids that real-time feedback. I love that what do you emoji is coming in. But these last 4 are pretty exciting. And as Harvey had mentioned, it really depends on what you're using that day with your students.
So we're going to talk a little bit more about low tech, but how we could turn a low tech into a high tech type of strategy. Many times it's like we have students writing in notebooks or drawing on paper, and you can easily go into some of these things like our Google Slides, Google Classrooms, Forms, Docs, and you could take that low tech strategy that's written down in a journal and move it over into a high-tech strategy. So the first high-tech strategy that we're going to be talking about is Flipgrid. And maybe you take that low-tech strategy where the kids did their sketch note, and then they present it right there on Flipgrid. And so Flipgrid is a great way for video conference with your students. It's an asynchronous app, meaning that not everybody has to be there at the same time. They can respond to one another with feedback, and it's a wonderful, wonderful thing to do. Next, we're going to show you a little video about Flipgrid and what Flipgrid looks like and what it has to offer for your students.
It is amazing to watch what kids will say to a computer screen that they won't say to a teacher. There's a level of honesty that comes out from kids. You see more of their natural side, or sometimes more of their personality comes out when they're making a video. It's very personal. A lot of kids who are timid to speak directly to a person will share all kinds of things on a Flipgrid. So to me, it's a tool that very easily lets kids have a voice and be heard with very little work on the side of the teacher other than asking the question and giving the space for that question to be answered.
One of the things that I think librarians have been in the vanguard about is using technology in authentic ways, not just for consuming, but for creating. The authenticity of video and voice really helps build community and relationships. And relationships are what it's all about. Learning happens best when there are relationships between the faculty member, the instructor, and the students, and among the students. It was Maslow that said, if the only tool you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. We've got a more powerful toolkit than ever before, and we can use it to create and make a difference in our worlds. So I want my students to go out there and model that in the K-12 environment, and I want their students to be able to create and participate in powerful ways.
I was looking for an application where I could use technology inside the classroom as well as outside of the classroom for students to speak their math thinking and then hopefully have other students follow their same process. So most recently in my classroom, I took the math practices and focused on perseverance and understanding problems. Each group then was responsible to record a response that was moderated by myself, so they didn't have the opportunity to see any other student responses on Flipgrid until I unlocked those videos. And students now have gone back into the Flipgrid app and are watching videos and filling out a feedback form. The application and the use of technology has allowed for me to break down the four walls in my classroom. Instead of being able to critique just the students in that particular class in those 45 minutes, I'm having students critique across the 95 students on my team. It allows the students to see that sometimes those regular lower level students, in terms of what their ability appears to be, they're actually communicating their process much better than the kids who get the math very quickly.
When we first created Flipgrid, we focused primarily on the interaction between teachers and students to amplify student voice. What we found is that teachers use the environment to share their best practices and stories with other teachers around the world.
It's been a tool that really helps students get their voice to the forefront, and it has really been something that's been a catalyst for bringing dialogue back into the classroom.
We're in the selfie generation. These kids don't mind looking at a camera and practicing their English over and over and over again. They actually have fun. I've had students who are really shy in the classroom. They really liven up in front of the camera.
We love Flipgrid, and the reason why is because it allows our students to express themselves in their native language, American Sign Language, and communicate with each other instead of having to type everything in English, which is their second language.
So John, Flipgrid is an amazing piece of technology that we have at our disposal here, and it allows kids to talk about, we take that high tech with those oral strategies that you were talking about earlier, and it's awesome.
Yeah, it appears to be very impressive.
And the great thing about Flipgrid is you can take it global. You don't just have to have it within your classroom. You can visit a classroom down the hall, across the district, or even across the country and the world using Flipgrid. Another great tool for us to use is Padlet. Now, Padlet does have this thing where it's like they allow you to have 3 Padlets right now, and then if you have a subscription, you can get more. But Padlet has just the same capability as Flipgrid with a couple other tools. Padlet looks like a big bulletin board, and we can have students share text, photos, videos, links, audio, as well as video using Padlet. So this is just another great resource for students to show what they know, to show their learning.
That's great.
So, Mike, do you have another strategy that we could be using in high tech?
Absolutely, Ron. One of my favorites is Pear Deck, and Pear Deck allows teachers to use their existing Google Slides to engage students by using interactive polls, drawing slides. They can use open-ended questions. Similar to using Zeetings like we did today, one of the reasons why we didn't use Pear Deck is we wanted to ensure that we could hold as many participants as we possibly could. But if you're interested in Pear Deck, you can reach out to any of the TSSs or any of the learning coaches to help you get started. But it, again, is one of my favorite engagement tools that really allows you to check for student understanding. The final one that we have for you today is Edpuzzle, and again, this is another favorite of mine because you can take any video, either it's your own, you can create your own screencast, you can add your own magic touch to any existing video by adding formative questions to increase student engagement. So this is a really powerful tool that allows you to track student completion and student understanding, and then you can use that data to make any necessary adjustments in your student understanding. So I've seen it used too. I've also seen it used when teachers are trying to do like station rotation, where the Edpuzzle video becomes one of the rotations in the stations, and they can, the teacher can go back and collect that data to provide additional assistance to any students who need it. So we're going to take a final 3 minutes to resonate in a minute, but before we do that, I'm going to throw it over to Meg and Todd to talk about what tech strategy stands out to him.
Thanks so much, Mike. And because it's trout season, I'm going to reel in my next guest. Dr. Todd Bauer, here to talk about some tech strategies. And they,
Meg, can we pause just for a second?
Yes, yes.
I have a concern. Okay. So we have Ron and John over at the table. I think that sounds really cool.
Yeah.
But then I was thinking on the side here, Bauer and Burke sounds really cool.
Way better.
But even better would have been Bauer, Burke, and Rufo. We sound like a law firm, but she just made fun of me, so she's out. So we'll just go with Bauer and Burke.
Which is awesome.
Okay, let's do it. All right, let's talk about some tech.
Bauer and Burke, here to talk about some tech. And these are really just four that we've seen used in classrooms. We really like to promote what we're actually seeing happen in classrooms and how it's really shifting what students are learning. And I love that John pointed that out. It's about student learning. And sometimes we get so caught up in what we're teaching, we sometimes shy away from things like this. So out of these, I guess, tech tools, which do you find the most valuable or intriguing?
So I think I've used all of them in some capacity, actually as a building principal, because I think we're all students and all learners here. I used Flipgrid over the summer to kind of check in with faculty, saying like, what did you do over the summer? Tell us something fun you did and something you're looking forward to this year. We used Padlet during a presentation one time, but I would say that in the classrooms that I've been in this year, Pear Deck has been the most engaging tool. It's just a little more interactive and it adds a little bit of spark to the lesson. Finally, Edpuzzle I think is a great way to flip the classroom. So a lot of times our teachers will assign videos to watch at home so that they can do the work or the mess. That's for you, Ron, shout out. The mess in the classroom, but Edpuzzle is a great way to make sure people are actually watching the video and check for their understanding while they're doing so.
And if you have any others out there in the audience that you've used with students that you've seen really affect what is happening in your classrooms, tweet it out to us, share it out in your buildings, email us, invite us in, because we, of course, would love to see it. So we're going to ask you to do this poll real quick. We don't think you need 3 minutes, so we're just going to kind of look at these results as they come in. Out of these high-tech strategies, which one are you most excited about, or do you find the most interesting and appealing? I don't know, Dr. Bauer. They're loving this Pear Deck, which is what you just said. Some Edpuzzles coming in.
Similarly, no love for Padlet.
I
a little concerned
know,
here.
Me too. Not too exciting?
I think Mike Bodai has really pushed the Pear Deck thing, and he has lots of friends in this district, so that's probably why that's so high.
And I love that Flipgrid's coming in, especially for our youngest learners who are still learning how to read and write. And I think it's so amazing what I've seen happen in elementary school classrooms before they get to us in secondary, watching kids engage with tech and talking and then writing. This Flipgrid has been awesome to see them do that.
You'll also see students that aren't willing to raise their hand or talk in front of the class, but if you give them the opportunity to go out in the hallway or find a corner of the room and offer some feedback and talk to a camera rather than their class. And some people say that that's in isolation, but it's real world nowadays. People are talking on screen all the time, so I think it's a really great tool for some of our students.
And it's real life too, because we want our kids doing that, sometimes away from a screen. Thank you so much, Mr. Bauer. Really excited that you were with us. Thanks for reeling it in. And with that being said, we're now going to turn it over to what we're going to ask our audience members to do when they leave us from this amazing presentation. And this is something that we had asked our secondary friends to do. And we're going to ask you to think about what strategies that you want to use in your classroom to engage and empower all of our students. And we gave you a lot, and you probably have some of your own. But we're going to ask you to stay in the groups that you're in now and create a slide that answers this question. What are a few low-tech and high-tech strategies that were shared in this presentation and ones that aren't? We're going to have you create that slide. It's an interactive, collaborative slide which can be shared out at the end of the day.
Sounds great.
And an example I believe we have coming up of what this can look like, this is of course the Bodai, Burke, and Ron Martiello slide. We listed our group members. Our low-tech strategies are on one side, our high-tech are on the other. But this is our why. It's the impact it will have on student learning. And that is the most important thing that we want to stay focused on today, that these things happening in our classroom matter and they impact kids.
Absolutely. So I'm excited to see the feedback. I think this presentation was awesome, aside from the little dig from Dr. Rufo. But I hope our teachers got something out of this and they can translate it to the classroom next week.
Perfect. And with that, we're going to end with a quick little video to wrap up everything we've talked about today and then say our final goodbyes. You'll have a break and then you'll create your Google Slides.
You know what I love about formative assessment apps? They're like an energy drink for your lesson.
True, but like with energy drinks, the buzz doesn't last long and learning only goes so far.
Yeah, I'll give you that. Kids do have a tendency to finish the quiz and just move on. The whole thing ends up being more formative for teachers than for students.
Yep, if you want to push learning further, you got to show them that it's not the quiz that counts, but the thinking that happens after.
That has a nice ring to it, but what would that actually look like?
Whoa, listen, I'm just the ideas guy. You're the one who actually does stuff.
Okay, ideas guy, you've inspired me. Here's something. Start with a quiz, but then do a quick online poll about the quiz right after. Use your app's polling feature to gauge how students feel about how they did.
Yeah, makes sense. You could ask stuff like, how hard was the quiz? How confident are you feeling? Did you feel prepared?
You could also use the responses to differentiate future lessons or match up students who could support each other. Here's another idea. Get a discussion going after a quiz that focuses not just on what happened, but on what to do next.
Right, students are feeling less confident, could talk about what was challenging and zero in on specific ways to improve.
And more confident students could talk about how to push their understanding even further.
That's cool because it would really shift the focus from scores or grades to honest self-assessment.
Okay, one more tip. After a quiz, give students 1 or 2 short prompts that look to the future. Something like, what do you still need to know? Or what do you want to know more about? And ask them to respond with questions of their own.
That's great because you're basically getting students to articulate their learning goals and motivating them to go out and find the answers.
Yep, it's a bit more inquiry-based, and it'd be a great way to kick off some project-based learning.
3 solid suggestions, and here's the kicker. They really make use of all the app's features. Quizzes to hook students and check understanding, polls to gauge confidence, discussions to self-assess and ask questions, and real-time data to differentiate learning.
Not bad, right?
Not bad.
What an exciting afternoon of learning and highlighting the impact of that teachers have on students every day, and ways that we can continue to focus on student learning by creating opportunities for students to show us what they know and for us to use these opportunities to engage and empower all students. Thank you. Before we say our final goodbyes and a final quote that Meg's going to leave us with, I would like to thank you for participating throughout our quizzes and our Twitter feed this afternoon.
And it's really important before we close out to really remember that you are not just a teacher. You are a game changer in a child's life every day in the classroom. And the things that you do are noticed and appreciated every single day. So we wanted to thank you for that as well.
And before we say our final goodbyes here, Mike, we need to get Jenna, Todd, come on up here. Let's hug this out.
See.
So we want to thank everybody and all of you for all that you do each and every day. Thanks for making a difference in the lives of our kids. We wish all of you and your families and friends a wonderful, well-deserved spring break.
And we would be remiss if we didn't thank everyone here in our TV studio, our kids who came in today on their day off to help us, our learning coaches, and everyone that really helped make today possible. So thanks again. Have a great break.
And don't forget to check
for
understanding. Have a great break, everybody.
Bye.